BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. It is Wednesday, time for the AMA. That's the Ask Me Anything. And today we're going to be going through many questions about the Zodiac Killer and some other true crime cases, but we often begin these AMAs with a borrowed question from someone else's channel or show. And I've been following the show Hangin' with Hurt, which is mostly done in the Chicago area, like on the Chicago networks, but it's been recently uploaded to YouTube, and it's hosted by Frank Thomas, the former MLB star. And in the first episode, he was interviewing Charles Barkley, and he asked a really good question, and it was, if you could go to the city nearest you, the city that's closest to you, which sports team from that city would you want to own? Like, what would you want to be the owner of? And I really had to think, because the first thing is, here in West Virginia, we don't have professional sports teams, so I was like, the closest city, I guess, would be Washington, D.C., and if you can also include the Baltimore area, the Washington-Baltimore parts of the country. Do you guys know where Baltimore is, by the way? I only asked this because in the second episode of Hangin' with Hurt, he was interviewing Ray Lewis, the former linebacker for the Baltimore Ravens, and Ray Lewis was saying when he was in college, somebody approached him and said, "Hey, Baltimore is looking at you. Baltimore wants to talk to you." And he was like, "Who's Baltimore? I don't know anyone named Baltimore. What are you talking about?" Apparently, it's not very well known. But I was thinking, which sports team in this area would I want to be the owner of? Well, I'm really tempted to say the Washington Wizards, based on some of the deals that they've been cutting and just to see the future of some of their superstars and such, but I have to say the Washington football team, solely because I want to be involved with the naming rights. They're the Washington No Names. They don't have a name right now. Just because of that, I get to be the owner of a franchise, as well as choosing the name. None of this stuff about the fans get to decide and there's a contest. No, I want to choose the name of the sports team, and I'm going to give it something really terrible like the Washington Neds or something like that, but I want to do that all the same. Okay, now on to some things. We'll begin with the Zodiac Killer question. And our first question comes to us from Toxcoy, who says, did you see Tom Voigt's comments on the Zodcast? And the answer to that is yes, I did. I wasn't going to say anything about this originally because this would be responding to the comments section on somebody else's channel, and the Zodcast is, of course, hosted by Drew Beeson, author of the book Sighting In on the Zodiac Killer. And Tom Voigt was leaving numerous comments, especially on the episode that he did, like 16.5. I think it was called The Worst Suspect Ever, and we had another comment about this come to us from JT, who says, Drew Beeson deleted all of his videos. As I understand, he didn't delete them, he has just temporarily marked them private, and they will be coming back soon. But Tom Voigt was leaving many comments. Tom Voigt is, of course, the guy from ZodiacKiller.com, and he was saying a handful of things. The first is that Don Chaney is the worst suspect ever, and he is not the Zodiac Killer, but then he is also saying that if indeed Don Chaney is the Zodiac Killer, then he is the one who made the discovery years ago. I mean, I think 2 decades ago was the exact one, and we'll just pull up some of these right here. And what he says is, if Chaney is ever proven to be the Zodiac, I'm the guy who solved it. You know the case can't and won't be solved without DNA, right? Prosecutors won't touch this case without DNA. Been that way for almost 2 decades, and do you know that I exclusively am responsible for Chaney's DNA being taken? If Chaney is the Zodiac, I caught him 2 decades ago. And also saying that he literally wrote Drew Beeson's book, and the book is based on content that Tom Voigt came up with. The Cheney interview, the letter, take away my content, and there is no book. Can't believe I have to explain this. And it went on and on and on. Numerous comments, more than anyone can count. The problem is, though, I don't think anyone is being fooled because so much of this material is on the internet. We all know what happened. I mean, yes, it's true. Tom Voigt did provide the source material for certain elements in the Don Cheney theory, such as interviewing Don Cheney, such as obtaining the handwriting sample, and he even says that he got Don Cheney's DNA. All right, but Drew Beeson is the person who took that source material and actually put it together, into a viable theory, and he also discovered all of the things about Don Cheney and the Bakersfield connection with Paul Avery, Bakersfield Junior College, the clues in the Mikado. Drew Beeson is the one who actually took those things, like a handwriting sample, and noticed some suspicious things in an interview that Tom Voigt had done, and he cites this stuff all the time. He's very clear that he's citing the interview with Tom Voigt. He's not trying to take that away from him, but instead, I mean, like as I said, we can see exactly what happened, and I don't really think anyone is going to be fooled, or anyone is not going to be aware of what's going on. So that's all I really have to say. I mean, if Tom Voigt wants to talk about theories about the Zodiac Killer, he has the biggest Zodiac Killer site out there. He sure can. I just wish that it wouldn't go to the point of name calling in the comment section, and I quote, telling somebody that he has a face only a blind mother could love. So I felt that was somewhat impractical. Okay, now moving on to our next comment about the Zodiac Killer. It is in relation to a different suspect. Not Don Cheney, but Lawrence Kane. And we haven't talked about Lawrence Kane for a while. But we had two comments come in from Red Random Rage, who says, did Harvey Hines ever question Lawrence Kane's mother? It would feel like a good idea because they had a strong relationship. And also on their episode, Lawrence Gill Kane, Red Random Rage asks me this again. Did Harvey Hines ever question Lawrence Kane's mother? And the honest answer is, I wasn't able to just pull that off the top of my head, but I do know someone who was able to answer that. I contacted Travis, who runs the Lawrence Kane WordPress, lawrencekane.wordpress.com. He's been researching Lawrence Kane as a criminal for the last 10 years. And I say as a criminal because Travis seems to be under the impression that Lawrence Kane was not the Zodiac Killer, but he definitely had a long criminal history, and you can also hear more about this in our Lawrence Kane episodes on BlackBoxOnlineRadio. But in regards to that question, did Harvey Hines, the person who brought Lawrence Kane forward as a Zodiac suspect, ever interview Kane's mother? This is what Travis wrote to me. Hi, Ned. Information regarding Kane's relationship with his mother is minimal. All I can state with certainty is that she lived with Kane intermittently and that they were apparently quite close. Hines's report describes her as infirmed and notes that she had a history of mental instability. Larry Lowe, who was interviewed for History Channel's 2017 Hunt for the Zodiac Killer program, stated that Kane was obsessed with his mother, and that's about it. To the best of my knowledge, Harvey Hines never interviewed her, though he did interview Kane on several occasions. Once again, thank you, Travis, from the Lawrence Kane WordPress. Now, as far as being interviewed by Harvey Hines, I always think that is very valuable. And, I mean, you heard about Don Cheney being interviewed, but at the time when Tom Voigt interviewed Don Cheney, to the best of my knowledge, Don Cheney was not a Zodiac Killer suspect. He was more or less still just the person who's providing information about Arthur Lee Allen. Perhaps somebody suspected Don Cheney prior to the year 2000, but a lot of those claims that people have been making are much more recent. I mean, definitely not in the 1970s. I can't tell you anyone in the 1970s or 80s that was looking at Don Cheney as the lone perpetrator in the Zodiac Killer mystery. I can't tell you that off the top of my head. But but you heard there that Hines had the ability to interview Lawrence Kane multiple times. Mike Rodelli also interviewed his suspect, Shel Cavale. And even here on this channel, if you listen to our interview that we did with Joe from the Zodiac Killer Insights series, prior to the interview, we played Joe's phone conversation with Gareth Penn, his suspect, and Gareth Penn starts out as a researcher but then goes on to become a suspect himself. I think that it's so valuable and telling about how people respond to these direct questions. Like with Gareth Penn, he doesn't deny being the Zodiac killer, but instead he just sort of kind of gets a little bit agitated, but he doesn't deny it directly, and that really just has to make you wonder about how people will respond to things. Mark Hewitt also said something very similar about corresponding with Ted Kaczynski, that Kaczynski never even denied being the Zodiac killer when he was confronted about it. Instead, he just sort of talks loosely about it. Now, and when it comes to someone like being accused of being the Zodiac killer and not denying it completely, I have to also go back to the letters of Bruce Davis, an individual named Caleb. I don't know his last name, but he contacted Bruce Davis in prison, and he was just like, okay, Bruce Davis, you were Charles Manson's right-hand man. People are saying all this stuff about you on the internet, that you're the Zodiac killer, and Bruce Davis instead provided explanations about how their theory was incorrect. I don't believe that Bruce Davis was the Zodiac killer. I also do not believe that a lot of the info that was in the Bruce Davis theory was very genuine, because Bruce Davis's responses are so much clearer. I mean, they're clear, they're cogent. They also don't sound like someone who is trying to deceive you. Instead, someone who is genuinely trying to refute an allegation. Okay, it says that in 1966 I was in Riverside doing this. No, that's not true. And here's why. Actually, in 1966, I was doing that. I mean, someone has provided an explanation where it doesn't appear that deception is indicated, but I could be wrong about that. Our next comment comes to us from NPC Porky on our episode Zodiac Killer Michael Cole Theory. Oh yeah, we did 2 responses to Michael Cole's book Zodiac Revisited, and those are available here on this channel. And Porky writes, does Michael Cole ever refer to the murder of Ray Davis in 1962, or were the books already finished before that murder was publicly spoken about in 2020? If there is something Freudian about the Zodiac, I theorize that him targeting young couples could be him lashing out at his parents, who were very young when they conceived him and probably took care of him in a very negligible manner. And I agree with you that Bates was not killed by the Zodiac, but he was fascinated by the killing and fabricated the confession and the Bates had to die letters in order to insert himself in his imagination as the perpetrator of the killing. Insert himself in his imagination as the perpetrator of the killing. Well, which part of this comment should we target first? Does Michael Cole ever refer to the murder of Ray Davis in 1962? To the best of my knowledge, I don't think he. I mean, there may have been a sentence about it, but I don't recall one in the book. I would say no, because in the table that was provided in Michael Cole's book on the murders that took place, he begins in 1963 with Gaviota, the murders of Domingos and Edwards. I mean, that is the earliest one that I remember from the book, but I didn't have it memorized 100%. In regards to Sherry Jo Bates being a genuine Zodiac killer victim, let's read that sentence again because I think it's very well worded by NPC Porky. The confession and the Bates had to die letters in order to insert himself in his imagination as the perpetrator of the killing. Insert himself in his imagination as the perpetrator of the killing. Wow, I mean, is that really what happened? That somebody, some way, somehow, learned information about the murder of Sherry Jo Bates and then took credit for it in the confession letter? And this could have even come from things such as police reports or talking to police officers and investigators. I mean, it's a wider theory that's or it's a theory that's been shared more widely, I'd say, in the past couple years, that the perpetrator in the Sherry Jo Bates incident was not the same person as the one who wrote the confession letter and sent in multiple letters saying Bates had to die. There will be more. Now, because Tom Voigt did put out all those comments on Drew Beeson's channel, and on the Zodcast, I went over to ZodiacKiller.com for 2 reasons. One of them was I was actually trying to get some information about Richard Gaikowski for a comment that we are going to do in just a second. And the other one was I saw that his website had been redone, and there's been a whole revamping of ZodiacKiller.com. And I finally decided to give a listen to the podcast that Tom Voigt had done on Sherry Joe Bates and all the things Bates related. A lot of people had been encouraging me to listen to it about a year ago when he was talking about the Riverside connection between Sherry Joe Bates and Cecilia Ann Shepard. And that has just set off a giant snowball effect around the internet. I mean, people have been leaving a lot of comments, even on this channel, saying that they think that the same person killed Sherry Joe Bates, who murdered Cecilia Shepard at Lake Berryessa, the perpetrator who's wearing the hood and the costume. I mean, they're saying, hey, both those killings happened by knife, and then there's like the message that's written on the car door, just like Bates had to die, there will be more, even though those messages are different, definitely different wording. But with I think that number one in that podcast, he was saying that Sherry Joe Bates is definitely confirmed as a Zodiac killer victim. I'm still not convinced. But I do also have to apologize because I was repeating something that I had learned about on the internet, that Sherry Joe Bates had been stabbed 42 times. And what Tom Voigt was saying in that podcast was that he read the autopsy report and that she was actually stabbed much fewer than 42 times. Somebody left a comment once on the channel saying that, calling me out on that, saying, hey, you're saying that Sherry Joe Bates was stabbed 42 times? I just read the autopsy report and it says she was stabbed much fewer than 42 times. And the thing is, though, in the podcast, Tom Voigt didn't put an exact number on it, so I'm not sure what what he exactly wanted to say with that. I mean, like, I'm not sure exactly how many times she was stabbed, but fewer than 42. I guess it's just something that's been shared too frequently. And Tom Voigt even said in that show that he learned about that from one of the investigators. They said, you can put it on the internet, I certify this information, and it turned out to be incorrect. And now I said we had a question about Richard Gaikowski. So this is from Guadalahonky. Yes, that's the username. And this is perhaps the question of the day. This is perhaps the best one. And it says, question. On the form at 12:03 in your video, Richard Gaikowski Q&A, why does Richard lie about his age? He says that he was born... No, excuse me, I misread it. He was born in 1936 in Watertown, South Dakota, not 1938, as the form says. And like, I I did not notice that. I mean, I did put the clip up on the screen of a form just to show an example of Richard Gaikowski's handwriting, but the Guadalahonky pointed that out very clearly. It says 1938, and I was like, well, maybe it's just an internet misconception that Gaikowski was born in 1936. So that's why I was on ZodiacKiller.com, and I went over to ZodiacCiphers.com and pulled up Guy's obituary. Everything else says that he was born in 1936. Why does it say on that form that he was born in 1938? It's a very good observation, and I just tried to read up on this, and I could not find an exact answer. I mean, maybe some of this Gareth Penn, Ray Grant theorizing is correct, and then you can see March 14th, 1938. And when I said theorizing, number one, 3.14, that's the number pi. And then when I was talking to Joe from Zodiac Killer Insights channel, he was saying that there's a theory out there that's been discussed by Gareth Penn and Ray Grant that the number pi can relate to the name Zodiac, and there's a way to pull it out. But also, the number 38 is very important in Gareth Penn's book, Time 17. The two numbers that are very relevant to Gareth Penn's theory are 17 and 38. And he uses 38 as a way to connect Michael Henry O'Hare to the Zodiac Killer mystery, saying that O'Hare was the Zodiac Killer. I don't believe that for a second. But there it is, 3.14, 38 on Guy's form right there. But because Tom Voigt has things on Richard Gaikowski, I pulled up his passport application, and it showed that yes, he's born in 1936. That doesn't appear to be an error that you will be reading everywhere, that he's born in 1936. I really don't know what that form is all about. Another thing I was even looking for is maybe it's a different Richard Joseph Gaikowski, but I really do think that is the same one. I think that is Geik. But in regards to Geik being the Zodiac Killer, number one, if you do look at his handwriting almost certainly he did not write the letters. His handwriting is much neater. It has none of that abnormal tilt. And I also encountered something from ZodiacKiller.com that was saying that Guy's trip to Ireland has been debunked. For the longest time, people were saying that Richard Gaikowski could not be the Zodiac Killer because he was out of the country in December of 1968, and he couldn't have committed the Lake Herman Road murders. And as I said, Tom Voigt posted Guy's passport application. I repeat, the passport application, not the passport itself, and it shows that he did apply for the visa, and I think he was expected to have left on the 1st of November, 1968, and the expected duration of the trip was 1 month, and I was not impressed by that at all. I mean, okay, it says expected duration, intended duration of the trip is going to be 1 month. Well, I mean, that's hardly the same as an exit stamp and an entry stamp into the United States. And, I mean, other people have obtained copies of people's passports, such as Gareth Penn's, and we frequently use that one here on the channel, showing that Gareth Penn actually arrived in the United States October 30th, 1965, coming back from Germany, I believe. And October 30th is, of course, the date that Sherry Jo Bates was allegedly murdered. And I say allegedly because it's possible that Sherry Jo Bates was actually murdered on October 31st, but that like the murder may have occurred, at 12:01 p.m., 12:01 a.m., excuse me, like 1 minute after midnight, 12:01 a.m., and that this was actually some type of Halloween ritual mentality going on. Robert Graysmith really tried to expand upon that in Zodiac Unmasked. You can hear more about that in our book discussion on Graysmith and Zodiac Unmasked here on this channel, but what he was saying is that there's a holiday connection. If you look at December 20th, 1968, with the Lake Herman Road murders, that is close to the winter solstice, but it's also close to Christmas. I mean, it is really 4 days before Christmas because the crime occurred in the nighttime of December 20th, then July 4th, Independence Day, right? And then September 27th, October 11th, those are close to Columbus Day and such. I still don't believe that Columbus Day is a real holiday, and if anyone is going to be a holiday killer on Columbus Day, they need some serious help and such. But I'd like to go on to our next comment that is going to come to us from MNM, who says, I have a question regarding the incomplete fingerprint found in Paul Stein's taxi. The Zodiac claims that he uses 2 layers of modeling glue on his fingers to hide his fingerprints. You can construct your own fingerprints very easily on model glue by using a needle that you can draw patterns in the glue right before the glue dries to create the fingerprint. My question is, if you think it is possible that the Zodiac had done so with the murder of Paul Stein and deliberately left a fingerprint that he himself made to mislead the police without risking or revealing his own fingerprints. It may sound like a fantasy, but the fact is, it's very easy to manufacture. Keep up the good work. Hey, thank you, Eminem. The Zodiac was horribly methodical. I repeat, horribly. The lengths that this person went to hide the crimes, and even when you go to some other things like the handwriting. I was watching Evan from Texas's re-upload of his Zodiac Killer peer review video. He did a re-upload of that one on the channel Evan from Texas, and showing about how all the techniques that are used to disguise the handwriting. This person was very methodical. We don't even necessarily know if the Zodiac Killer actually put airplane cement on his fingertips. That was something that was like an individual boasting about in a letter. He's bragging about being able to fool the police. What did he? Is it possible that he poked pinpricks in the glue to create some distortion that would throw off the police? Absolutely, that is possible based on how methodical the planning is in the Zodiac Killer mystery. No matter which suspect you have, even if you entertain a group murder theory, or you think that this is the Zodiac hoax theory, whoever murdered Paul Stein could have manipulated the fingerprints in some way. And I'm really glad that Eminem pointed out that that would be such an easy thing to do. Okay, so I thank you to everyone who has listened to the first segment here, and we will be right back after this quick message. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum bum bum. At this time, I would like to talk about some of the ways in which you can help Black Box Online Radio. This channel relies on your support, and the best way you can help out is just by listening to some more content. If you like what you hear, you can hit that like button, subscribe, and share with your friends on social media. But I should also say that Black Box Online Radio now has a Teespring page, and there will be some links in the description box. Please feel free to check out some of the merchandise that is available. Almost all sizes and colors are listed. So, you can also help out by going over to the Zodiac Killer channel and watching the documentary series Obsession into Darkness, parts 1, 2, and 3. I was one of the contributors for that, and you can see some other great Zodiac content on the Zodiac Killer channel. And yes, there will be a part 4 of Obsession into Darkness at some point in the future. And for now, let's get back to the show. Okay, hello, and we are back. We have a few more Zodiac Killer questions to go through, but we had a question come in about the drug Katie, which is a form of legalized ecstasy. I shouldn't even call it a drug, but the question was from Midnight Story Productions about what are the ingredients in this thing called Katie, and I have the label here. Once again, this is described as a legalized alternative to ecstasy, and it's something called organic kava root extract, that's one, green tea extract, caffeine, organic intellect tree seed. I have no idea what that is. And also has turmeric extract, balsamic tea extract, all kinds of extracts, and then barley extract. I think they pretty much extracted everything you could imagine. Olive oil, vitamin E, vitamin D, vitamin B12, and it goes on with some other things that I cannot pronounce. One of them, though, that I did miss was black pepper extract. So it seems like a bunch of herbs and spices and vitamins that they're using to try and recreate the effects of ecstasy. I read about turmeric in the past, and turmeric can actually cause a surge in blood flow to the brain. Or the reason why, like if you were to go to a GNC or a vitamin shop and they would sell those capsules of turmeric, is because it improves blood flow to the brain, allegedly. But when you actually do take those capsules, you do feel something different. But yes, the first time is definitely the best for this Katie thing. And someone also left a comment on that episode saying that it didn't sound like ecstasy from doing it during the recording. It sounded like someone who was on Xanax. I sounded like somebody who had taken a Xanax, rather. I definitely don't understand how anybody could use this in a nightclub for a good time. It makes music more enjoyable, like techno, house, and trance music. Sure, that sounds great, but you don't want to move. You kind of want to go into a paralyzed, comatose state. But that is you can hear more about that in our episode on it's an AMA where we talk about Katie. Okay, going on to a comment on our episode Zodiac Revisited Michael Cole book discussion. This is from Christ Hendu, who says, "This is genuinely one of the best Zodiac episodes I've heard. Great job, Ned." Hey, thank you so much for that. But I just wanted to say that there are 2 episodes out on the Michael Cole theory on his book Zodiac Revisited. The first one is just that Zodiac Revisited Michael Cole book discussion. I actually thought the second one came out a little bit better because in that one that Christ Hendu was just talking about, it's comparing the claims and theories of Michael Cole to the other Zodiac theorists out there. And in the episode Zodiac Killer Michael Cole Theory that you can find on this channel, that's more trying to examine his material and examine his claims as opposed to just saying what do other people say about this in contrast to Michael Cole's book. But if anyone would like to listen to those are available here on this channel, always extending the invitation. Many people believe that the Zodiac Killer was a serial killer who avoided capture by only attributing a certain set of murders to the name Zodiac. Like from 1968 to 1969, there is just this presence, this persona, this identity that is the Zodiac. And during the other crimes that were committed, that presence and persona were not used. And an example of this is George Hill Hodel, who is his son Steve Hodel accuses him of being the Black Dahlia Avenger, of committing the murder of Lucilla Lalou in the Philippines, the lipstick murders in Chicago, and the list goes on. There are actually 25 different murders that Steve Hodel accuses his father, George Hill Hodel, of committing. And we have one comment that came in on our episode on George Hill Hodel from Ashley B. Ashley, who says, "Here's the issue. It's not that he was able to commit mass murder and not get caught. He did get caught, but it's known to the Los Angeles Police Department that they were corrupt to the core at the time, and he easily got off, as number one, he was the county coroner, and number two, he was able to pay those involved." And it actually says pay off those involved. That is one word I left out. Pay off those involved. Okay, George Hill Hodel was a suspect in the Black Dahlia case, as Steve Hodel even says that his father was the prime suspect in the Black Dahlia murder mystery, and some people think that the case is open and shut. They're like, this was George Hill Hodel. They can tell you which room in the house was the place where Elizabeth Short was murdered. They can tell you how he transported her body using cement bags to the dump site where she was then posed. They're like, we know exactly what happened. It was George Hill Hodel. Then there are other people who are definitely not convinced, and they don't believe that George Hill Hodel was the Black Dahlia Avenger. But the police corruption angle, the LA corruption angle, is something that they really explore in the miniseries I Am the Night. While that is mostly a fictional retelling, they wanted to show that George Hill Hodel was someone who was very good with networking. He was very good with interacting with members of the elite circles of California, not only the police, not only the politicians, but the actors and the musicians, Hollywood. All of that is there in Los Angeles. So what George Hill Hodel was able to do was to use those types of connections to his advantage, and not only the famous people, but also the surrealist artists. And we even mentioned the photographer Man Ray, whom Hodel became a fan and follower of. And it's possible that the Black Dahlia was an attempt to recreate an act of surrealist art and in itself, because George Hill Hodel was heavily inspired by Man Ray's photo, The Minotaur. Our next comment comes to us from Phobos y Demos Argentina, who says, Domingos, referring to Domingos and Edwards, the two people who were murdered at Gaviota in 1963. It's the Lake Berryessa guy. Is he the Zodiac? Now, we also had something about... Oh, first, I think we should address that. Were the murders of Domingos and Edwards at Gaviota committed by the Zodiac killer? There are some big similarities. There are about a couple who was targeted in somewhat of a secluded area. They are shot multiple times, though, like 26 bullets were fired at Gaviota, according to Michael Cole's book. That's quite different than that of the Zodiac killer's activity, and the explanation that's provided by Michael Cole is that the perpetrator recognized that preparation is very important and things need to be planned more effectively, or also committing a crime like that is very difficult to plan, and it's going to be very sloppy if murders are committed that way. And in short, Gaviota was a learning experience. But the big differences are not only the number of bullets that were fired. They were dragged to a shack. The shack was set on fire, and Linda Edwards' shirt was torn open. There are many differences that are inconsistent with the other things in the Zodiac killer mystery, but that's something that you see, though, with the Zodiac. Just every single crime scene, every single set of murders has its own set of differences, and it really is not a consistent pattern in any way. Some people think that the Lake Herman Road shooting on December 20th and the Blue Rock Springs shooting on July 4th are very similar. They think those are definitely the crimes that were committed by the same person. And then Lake Berryessa and the Paul Stein murder and all of these other crimes that we're talking about, Domingos Edwards, Sherry Joe Bates, all of these other crimes were committed by different people, but then there's just the same perpetrator for Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs. I mean, it's an unsolved mystery, and we're always open to other possibilities. But we had a comment that came to us from Playtime about that exact subject. Don't you think it's impossible for one guy to have done everything? There are just too many layers to the correspondence for the cards, letters, and the ciphers not to be the work of some well-organized group. The group murder theory, the multiple killers theory. In 2019, I was all about this. You can go back and hear the older Black Box Online radio uploads about why I was just like, we're dealing with the psychology of multiple people. Well, here's an alternative. Is it possible for one person to have committed all this? Oh, yes, absolutely. Because what people do when they entertain the idea of a single perpetrator in the Zodiac Killer mystery is they look at the clues in literature. They look at the psychological profiling, and they're thinking that this is a person who's working a regular job, who is very imaginative, and like what we said about forcing his imagination onto things, but he's inspired by very specific books and movies, comic strips, and music, and all of these things are being portrayed in his crimes and also documented in the letters, like references to works of literature. In this year alone, in the last 12 months, I mean, I've learned about so many new things from whether it's the writings of Joseph Conrad, Herman Melville, T.S. Eliot. There are these literary clues in the Zodiac Killer mystery. And when we talked about the video from Skating Crow Productions, The Zodiac's Wasteland, well, it's just that. She made the claim, the person who runs Skating Crow Productions, that the Zodiac is using T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland as a playbook. So if somebody is using works of literature as a playbook, I definitely think that there's more than just one work of literature in the playbook, and it's not only T.S. Eliot's. But when you look at those types of clues, that looks like a single perpetrator. This person just designed it. It's not done in an arbitrary way. Many serial killers will operate by targeting a sex worker who's in a vulnerable position. They'll lure them to a secluded area. Or you also have people like perhaps Moses Sotole, the serial killer from South Africa, who was just very good with the superficial charm, who would start talking to women and then lure them to secluded areas. Ted Bundy, for example, he also would wear that fake cast on his arm, say, "Hey, can you help me move something off of my boat just down over there?" I mean, some people are just very good at putting on that glib and superficial charm, and they lure people to secluded areas and they murder them. With the Zodiac Killer, absolutely not. I mean, like, not even close, because even what we said about Gaviota, or the murder of Sherry Joe Bates, or Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs, you have a lot of the times someone is ambushed, someone is forced into the vulnerable situation. It's possible with the murder of Sherry Joe Bates that would be one that is a little bit different in such that she may have been lured to a location, but we aren't even necessarily sure where Sherry Joe Bates was for the entirety of the day leading up to her death, like the events leading up to her death. I think a lot of that has been lost to time, unless someone involved with her murder is still alive. But something like Lake Herman Road, someone sneaks up on David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, they fire some bullets, and then they get out of there. Very similar with Blue Rock Springs, unless it's some type of botched sting operation, police inside job. Maybe. Those aren't even wild conspiracy theories at this point. But definitely at Lake Berryessa, you have Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard on a picnic blanket, and then the Zodiac Killer is walking over to them, and they get blindsided, more or less. He holds them at gunpoint, and they're tied up, and then they are stabbed. Like, that is definitely not someone who is luring the victims to a secluded area. The killer is moving toward the victims. And all that means is just that this is someone who planned this using certain markers in literature, certain markers in things like comic books and movies, and also certain markers in mathematics as a type of playbook. And we even said there is that possibility that Richard Gaikowski was giving us a mathematical signature with 3.1438. And that this is going to tie into something bigger. I don't believe that Geik was the Zodiac Killer. In fact, I don't even. I just think that you'd have to go back to some of our old episodes and we can explain all of that in greater detail as to why I don't think Geik was the Zodiac Killer, but just throwing that out there. In regards to how many murders did the Zodiac Killer commit, we have a comment that comes to us from Neo Classique, who says, "You can take any known unsolved serial killing case committed in California with near enough Zodiac Killer methodology and call it a Zodiac crime. How far back in time does it go?" A lot of people are doing that. As we said, the murder of Ray Davis in 1962, well, that's well before Lake Herman Road in 1968, Gaviota in 1963, Then the Swindle murders that took place in, 64, Sherry Jo Bates in 66, Nikki Benedict in 1967, and it's quite odd that Nikki Benedict is not mentioned in Michael Cole's book either. Not Ray Davis, not Nikki Benedict, but it goes all the way up to 1981 with the murder of Joan Webster in Massachusetts, and Joe from the Zodiac Killer Insights Theory series has a theory about how his suspect, Gareth Penn, murdered Sherry Jo Bates in 66, then 184 days later murdered Nikki Benedict in Poway, California. She was murdered by knife, also an example of when the killer moved toward the victim, and Nikki Benedict was walking home down a dirt pathway, and she was caught off guard, stabbed, and murdered, and then the perpetrator disappeared. And then with the murder of Joan Webster in 1981, that's possibly a crime that could also be connected to Gareth Penn in Boston, Massachusetts. Joan Webster was abducted after leaving Logan Airport. But still, a man did approach her at the airport. With the Zodiac Killer, it does seem, though, that there is, if anything, if any type of pattern exists, the perpetrator is moving toward the victims as opposed to luring them in to some other place, like the Gary Ridgway Ted Bundy dynamic. But I definitely don't think anything is consistent with the Zodiac Killer. All right, and we will be right back after this quick message. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum bum bum. At this time, I would like to remind everybody about YouTube Premium. If you use the YouTube Premium features, you can download Black Box Online Radio, take it on the go, out walking, in the car, anywhere and anyhow. YouTube Premium also gives you access to special YouTube original shows and YouTube music. And now, let's get back to the episode. Hello, back again. In this segment, we're going to be talking about the Boston Giggler, a serial killer, but we have one final question that came in, and that was, what do you think about the YouTube channel Zodiac Killer Identified? And I don't have the name of the person in front of me, or else I'd give them a shout out, but I just remembered that I said I would do that one this time around. With Zodiac Killer Identified, it's run by an individual named Sepp. He talks a lot about Don Harden as a Zodiac Killer suspect, and I just wanted to share something about, I don't think that Don Harden, the guy who solved the 408 cipher, is the best suspect, but I thought it was very informative when Zodiac Killer Identified put forward their suspect in the murder of Nikki Benedict as Robert Fisk, Bob Fisk, the individual who worked at the butcher shop nearby where Nikki Benedict was murdered. And this is a guy who is just someone who may have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, just in the vicinity, because it's Bob Fisk's son Ronald that actually finds Nikki Benedict's body on the 1st of May 1967, and his father worked in the nearby butcher shop. I mean, it's possible just being in the vicinity of the crime, or maybe he indeed did either have some greater involvement or knew something about the case, but I don't even want to say anything more than that. I just thought that was very, it was a fair and honest attempt at providing a suspect from Zodiac Killer Identified, and I also thought that it was good that Zepp from the channel was not just simply saying that Don Harden murdered everybody west of the Mississippi in the 1960s, the way that some people do with their larger theories, like Wayne Edwards, for example. But I said we would talk about the Boston Giggler. This is something that was recommended by Kelly Gable multiple times. Thank you, Kelly, for sharing the stuff in the comments section. And I was also contacted on Instagram by Hunter Walker about doing something on the Boston Giggler. This is connected to an individual named Kenneth Harrison. When I was first pulling this stuff up, I don't know if I misread it or I was just my expectation. I thought that this was going to be an unidentified serial killer in Boston that was operating in the 1960s, but many sources say they've identified the Giggler as Kenneth Harrison, an individual who committed a spree of murders in 1967 and 69. There isn't even a Wikipedia page for him, but Kelly wanted to share something with me, saying that, of course, this person is not the Zodiac Killer, but there are some striking similarities, and I would actually just like to go over to, as I said, not Wikipedia, but Real Life Villains wiki. I mean, it's arranged in a very similar fashion, but this is Real Life Villains, and it says Kenneth Harrison, also known as the Giggler, died in 1989, and he was a serial killer that was active in Boston in 1967 and 69. His murder spree took place in 1967, or the beginning of it, that is. Harrison was working as a taxi driver when a 6-year-old girl accepted a ride from him. Harrison stopped near the Fort Point Channel and lured the girl and threw her into the water. He lured the girl out and threw her in the water, excuse me. Her body was washed up, but the death was ruled an accident, and Harrison got away with murder. 2 days later, in 1969, Harrison's murderous urges surfaced again. On June 15th, Harrison met ex-Marine Joe Breen at a bar. With Breen's friends having left to go to another bar, Harrison took Breen outside, then smashed his skull in before ditching his corpse. He then called 911 and told the operator where to find Breen's corpse, identifying himself as the Giggler and laughing about it. And that's actually some very crazy stuff right there. Like, because there's a recording of this that has been online. I mean, I was even quite skeptical that it was the real one, but it is of. So after the murder of Breen, we have the 911 call that said Harrison's words: "My dear, at the corner of Washington and Neyland Streets, in a construction site, there will be a man down in the water, dead. The Giggler." And then he busted out into laughter and hung up. And before you even think about the Zodiac Killer, it sounds so much more like a Batman villain from perhaps the 1940s or 50s or something like that. But, I mean, Washington and Neyland Streets, I mean, identifying things like the crossroads, like maybe the murder of Paul Stein and the Zodiac Killer mystery, as well as just calling in to brag about the killings. And I was reading that off of dangerousminds.net, where they have, where they shared the exact words of the 911 call. And there was this Tumblr that was sent to me by Hunter Walker with the voice recording, and yes, it's maniacal. It is absolutely maniacal, but this is not the end of the crime spree, because later in 1969, Kenneth Harrison strangled a 7-year-old boy to death with a piece of twine, once again telling the police where to find the body. Later still, he went back to the Fort Channel Bridge and hurled an old woman to her death. However, police officers investigating the murder of Breen identified Harrison as the man who left the bar with him and arrested him. In custody, Harrison confessed to all the crimes and was sentenced to life in prison 4 times over. Serving his sentence in Bridgewater State Hospital, Harrison claimed to have burned down the Paramount Hotel, but this was never proven. On April 20th, 1989, Harrison committed suicide by taking an overdose of antidepressants. Now, my response to this is, did you notice something about the ages and genders of the victims? First, he starts by killing a little boy. Then he kills an ex-Marine. Then he kills another little boy. We have a boy at age 7, a boy at age 9, and then an elderly woman. I mean, my instincts tell me that that is definitely not the typical behavior of a serial killer, and it is possible that people do confess to crimes that they did not commit. But I mean, and all in the beginning parts of this episode, we were even talking about how the Zodiac is not a consistent serial killer. If this guy, the Giggler, Kenneth Harrison, did actually do all of these things, then I wouldn't be 100% shocked. But I'm noticing some inconsistencies, and my instincts definitely point me toward the possibility of a false confession in at least one of these instances. In regards to this confession here that says, "My dear, at the corner of Washington and Neyland Streets, there'll be a man on a construction site down in the water dead, the Giggler," and then it just busts out into maniacal laughter. Ah ha 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 ha, says the transcript here. That was my attempt at maniacal laughter. Now, this could just show you that people do taunt the police more frequently than expected, and there are numerous cases of people writing in letters and making phone calls taunting the police, and not only the Zodiac, the Black Dahlia Avenger wrote letters, and you can even go back to Jack the Ripper, but in regards to phone calls, we always have to bear in mind that it does appear that it could be possible that people could be learning about things from the police scanner, and then people make prank calls when they learn that someone is in pursuit or that an incident has taken place, there's been some type of disturbance, and people would make prank calls by calling and saying, "I'm the one who did it," and for example, if there was something on the police scanner about a body at Washington and Neyland Street and down in the water, and then someone would call in and say, "There's a body at Washington and Neyland Street in the construction site down on the water. The man is dead. I'm the Giggler." Um, What I first noticed though is just very, very inconsistent behavior. Also, if somebody had called in saying I'm the giggler after every single crime, I mean that wouldn't necessarily prove that even all the murders were attributed to a single individual. That could also be a serial prank caller. I mean, the only point I just wanted to share about that is that stuff does happen. I mean, that stuff did happen, and you can go back to some of our material on the myth of the Zodiac Killer, as well as just some things from the AMAs when we discuss that a little bit more. But strangling to death a 7-year-old boy with a piece of twine, throwing a woman off of a bridge, crushing in the Marine skull Joe Breen, and all of these things here, targeting a 6-year-old girl. Um, where's the where's the consistency? No consistency, no pattern. I take it back. The Zodiac Killer isn't the most inconsistent serial killer ever. This Boston Giggler is the most inconsistent serial killer. The victims are not of the same age. The genders are not the same. If anything, if you would like to say that this guy is targeting children and he's a child murderer, that's disgusting and evil and heinous. But also, to say that then he turned around and murdered Joe Breen, who was an ex-Marine, that is a little bit different. But what the comments that were requesting an upload on this, or to have it discussed in the AMA rather, were looking at how maybe the Zodiac learned about some of this stuff from the papers, maybe a Boston newspaper or something like that, or maybe some type of nationwide news coverage, and that this was an inspiration for the persona that was truly developed in the summer of 1969. Can we just say that 1969 was a weird year? I mean, not only do we have the Zodiac Killer and the Manson family, Ted Kennedy and Chappaquiddick, now the Boston Giggler, but we also had the moon landing. It really seemed like the 1960s were, well, a very pivotal time in American history, but also the year 1969 itself. I mean, there's just so much, well, evil and chaos going on, and it really stayed in place for years. I mean, people are still talking about Charles Manson and the Zodiac, and some people still think the moon landing was fake. But in regards to these actions here, I mean, on June 15th is when Kenneth Harrison allegedly murdered Joe Breen in a bar. I mean, he was convicted of it, as you heard, sentenced to 4 life sentences, committed suicide in prison. But June 15th would be before the Blue Rock Springs shooting on the 4th of July, and then the passing of Darlene Ferrin on July 5th. So there is something about that. All right, well, thank you to everybody who's listened to this AMA here, and perhaps we'll do something more on Kenneth Harrison as a serial killer in the future. This is just, a little discussion in the AMA. Maybe we can have a larger episode coming out in the near future. But that's all for me now, and thank you to everyone who has listened once again. You can follow the show on Instagram, BlackBoxNed88. You can also write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. That's the email address available in the description box. And if you like what you hear, you can hit that like button and always subscribe. See you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.